Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with a Therapist. My name is Jennifer Kyalo. I am a psychologist and I am today joined by Dr. Joyce Wangari. She will be telling us a little bit about herself, about her work, and how you can get in touch with her if you are looking for a therapist. So, karibu sana Joyce to the platform. Please introduce yourself to the people. Tell them about yourself, a lot or a little, whichever is most comfortable.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. It's always a pleasure to be on any of your forums. So I'm quite honored. My name is Dr. Joyce Wangari Ngugi. I am, first and foremost, my foremost identity is an African woman. I'm also a Pan Africanist, African feminist. I am a wife, a mother, a sister, an aunt, a grandmother, a grandchild, stepdaughter, daughter, half sister, sister, and several other identities that I hold dear to me. And honored to be here.
That sounds amazing. That's many hats to wear. I am curious about your psychology hat the most because that's the one that's really connected to this. But also acknowledging that all the hats that you wear really contribute to the psychologist that you are. So I'm very curious about how you started your journey as a mental health professional. How did you end up here? Many people say that when they started as mental health professionals, they were doing it for themselves, for their own healing, for to find their own path and things along those lines. I don't know if that's your story or not, but I would love to hear about your story. How did you end up becoming a psychologist? What made you choose this career? And what was the experience from the beginning up to the point you are in right now? Yeah, please tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, I do fall in the majority of those who are wounded healers. I got into the field because of my own personal pain, that of my family and my community. Luckily, the profession of psychology has a big chance for people to work on themselves. So it's not like getting into any other career where it might be more removed from personal experience. So the person of the therapist is a model that really fascinates me. So in my own childhood, having had divorced parents, I really suffered from depression throughout high school and a host of other secondary symptoms. And then I knew around when we were selecting subjects, I knew it was psychology. For me, it was really clear. There wasn't any doubt. I even knew the college I would be entering. And so that for me was an early on choice, of course, coupled by the fact that already in school I was handling in student clubs a lot of work, just exploring. I was very curious about the nature of mental health, describing behavior, explaining behavior, um, predicting behavior, and controlling behavior. Those are the four goals of psychology: describing, explaining, predicting, and controlling or influencing. And so I knew that that would give my um, own way to transmute the pain as well as be of service to many more people. So that was actually the main reason I did that. So as soon as I realized first the change would have to start with me, then I stopped thinking, oh, I need to go help everybody else because that's how uh, training is set up. And I was lucky to go to a very practical, hands on training throughout. I've always studied as I worked. So over the last 18 years, did my certificate, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in the field, and just completed about 2 years ago in 2022 a whole load of learning just about how human beings work. Now, do I claim to know everything about human behavior? Hell no. In fact, I know less and less. And I think with specializations, we only just deepen in one area and we realize there's a vastness to it. But because of 18 years of lots of patterns and lots of interventions, now I can also say that I am quite adept at the human experience, and human services gives me a lot of fulfillment, a lot of joy. It's rarely lucrative work. However, the most payment I can receive is just really the satisfaction and fulfillment from transforming a life. Over my career, I have moved from direct client care, and I'm now more fascinated at systems, equipping the next generation, um, training, policy work, research work, what we call B2B services are business to business, or in other words, caring for the caregiver, or supervision of supervision, or mentorship of mentorship, because I now can see the gaps in, especially integration. So sometimes academia is great, but it may not always be linked with like a workspace experience. And so having had the combination of both, I think is an advantage. So I'm able to help a lot of people through things like clinical supervision. I am a course builder. I do lots of trainings, and then also research. Research feeds into policy work. And my other pet subject is obviously advocacy. So that's kind of the breadth of different roles that I do. But in terms of specializations, I really am fascinated at the moment by people of African descent all over the world, the African experience. I am a Pan Africanist. My biggest dream is to travel to each and every corner of Africa, each country. And as well, I would like to contribute to a Pan African model or experience or solution in any way, form, shape. While people get excited when they're leaving the global south and wanting to go to the global north, for me, I just want to do more of Africa, and still trying to wrap my head around how I learn the different languages because we have Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone, Arabophone, but that's my next big dream. I'm working every day at raising the bar of practitioner competence across sub Saharan Africa. The other pet subjects that I have found myself just naturally gravitating to is diversity, equality, and inclusion, DEI. So, in DEI perspective, I have worked with a lot of special populations, marginalized groups, people with disabilities, LGBTQI, um, religious minorities, and many different other kinds of minorities. I found that work very fulfilling because um, there is a very unique experience, a subjective experience of everyone to mental health work. And so for me, it introduces a layer of another layer of curiosity in terms of how do people navigate, especially something called minority stress. The fact of having an identity that's not majority, like being a refugee, an IDP. So that's another really big pet subject of mine. And this did not come deliberately. This was just like I pounced on it from different experiences. So yes, I've been doing a lot of Pan African work as well as DEI work, but I want to do more of the Pan African. I have done quite a lot of the DEI one. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I am hearing a lot of many different interests that contribute to the work that you do, and it's interesting in so many ways that I first of all I have so many things I want to ask as follow up questions to everything that you said, but I'm gonna pace myself. I'm gonna pace myself with this one. Um, I'm very curious. I want to go back to all the work that you're doing is very important, and all the subjects you've touched on are also very much needed in our society right now. And I'm very curious about. First of all, you said you Pan Africanism, going to every country, and all these things. How many countries have you been to so far in Africa?
Ah, not too many. I wish I could do more. I missed Uganda
Okay,
like thrice, but I've been to, no,
okay,
I missed Tanzania like thrice, but I've been to Uganda, and I've been to Somaliland, which is not the same as
mm,
Somalia or Puntland. Somaliland, Hargeisa in Somaliland,
yeah,
not Khartoum, Somalia.
mm,
Hargeisa,
mm,
Somaliland, and Uganda.
mm.
However,
Okay,
because of my online networks, I've worked with lots of people, including using interpreters and translators. So,
yeah,
at least with the tech space, we have that global experience and still looking
hmm,
for a way. Oh, and I've been to Ghana. So, at least I've been to a little bit of West
mm,
Africa and East Africa. Not been to
yeah.
South Africa or North Africa. So, yeah.
Ah, okay, okay. No,
Yeah.
there's time for all these things. Everything in its good time. I'm very curious about something that you mentioned about how therapy sometimes is not the most lucrative field. But the most payment you get is the work that you do with your clients. But I want to go to the practical side of that in the sense that many clinicians complain about not being able to put food on their tables. I have met many people that I went to school with who have graduated and they opted to start selling bags on WhatsApp because they do not have a job. They cannot get employed. They have looked, they have searched, they have sent out their CVs, but they still find it very, very difficult to land a job. And part of the reason that I do conversations with the therapist is because I talk to many people who are beginners in the therapy field. And emails that I get constantly is, where are the jobs? Where do I start? I don't know what to do. I have graduated. I don't know where to go. So, what is in your experience is, and even in your opinion, is the challenge that we're having with getting mental health professionals to land jobs, and not just landing jobs, but basically build careers, especially considering there's so much demand. Mental illnesses conversations are on the rise. People are talking about these things. People are seeking support, but also it's very difficult for people to get clients and to get jobs and build a career in this field. You've been in
Yeah.
it for 18 years.
Yeah.
What does that look like
Thank you.
in your opinion and experience?
So, on lucrative work and financial um, success in mental health careers, we have to redefine what success is. Although statistics all over the world show that most people who are qualified, trained, certified in the field work outside the field, the few who choose to work inside the field also face generally lower average salaries than their peers working in different fields. For example, compared to maybe business or the physical sciences like medical sciences and architecture and any other kinds of sciences. And we could consider psychology a science. However, most people will still classify it as human services, social services, and therefore, because of the bias against the field, most people will not actually think of well-paying, JD for this kind of work because they also think it's auxiliary or just a part-time hustle, you know, and things like that. Then we can also explain it using financial models. Especially in Kenya, most of mental health financing is actually from the private sector in global north companies. The biggest funder for mental health, for instance, in Kenya, is huge corporations doing pharmaceutical work like J&J. Those are the guys funding mental health work. We get a little bit of resources here and there from the World Health Organization, but it's mostly large private companies who see the need to map this. And further, aside from the overall mental health picture, if we look at the picture of what's happening with psychologists and counselors and therapists, is that again, they seem to be sidelined outside of mainstream psychiatry or medical sciences to do with the brain. And therefore, that's all the psychiatric, like psychiatric clinical officer, psychiatric nursing. And so, and it also happens that until recently, the the head of health services in the country had to be a medical doctor. In fact, that law was just repealed the other day. It was just changed. So, in terms of if you look at systems and policies and frameworks, mostly the people with power who can determine where psychotherapists or social scientists would get jobs are not actually social scientists. Those are medical
Mm.
people. So those kinds of biases have disadvantaged the practitioners in the field. And the question you asked on where are the jobs and how do people then build careers? We managed to build a network of over 3,000 practitioners where, first of all, we can redefine the first question. Instead of looking for jobs, how about entrepreneurship? Now, we initially used to suggest to everybody to be an entrepreneur until we realize that actually we can test people and also ask them about their choice for entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is also not easy, it's tough. So we changed our training model significantly, and now we have to have people choosing, opting into whether they want to be mentored through an entrepreneurship journey. Now, in this case, the typical profile of a graduate is they assume just because they've gotten a certificate of any level that there will be clients flocking at their door. And of course, most of us are trained in the one on one model. However, soon after, most graduates realize it's actually not about people flocking at my door. That's not the measure of success. And we've managed to help them redefine what success in their career would look like. I would say, if I would define career success in mental health, it is a balanced life where a practitioner is able to meet basic needs, have some expendable income to enjoy life, and not necessarily a full practice, but a well thought out schedule that is based on just how much, of the work they can take. All right. Now, not everybody even has the luxury of selecting their client caseload. If you're hired in an agency or a hospital, you will mostly have those things dictated to you. And most of the people outside of mental health will only be counting success by the numbers reached. And that has been a major, major challenge for practitioners because they're overloaded, they're underpaid, and they're overworked because there are only a few who are hired. For instance, you can find a county level hospital serving across maybe three counties, because county hospitals take a lot of referrals. You might find only one practitioner, and they have to deal with like 700 people, in a month, which is one-on-one therapy. So that's a lot. So on the jobs question, we've transformed it to those who wish to do entrepreneurship. And the best strategies that we've seen over time is I started the platform in October 2020, right in the heart of COVID. So people easily adopted technology because we encouraged them to. The other thing we've seen from all our data analytics of the 3,000 practitioners, most of them based in Kenya, but some also in the diaspora, is that they have managed to actually join together. So, group practice seems to be one successful strategy. So that even if one practitioner was sick one day of the week and the files were clearly indicated, the client could still get help. So, agency work that combines clinical one-on-one, element of group outreach, whether it is called training or um, preaching or any group outreach, whether it's in religious institutions, educational, corporates, the group approach really, really works well for this culture because many people will take vicarious learning very seriously, where there is indirect learning based on what is happening to their colleague. And that's group solidarity. So, group brings a lot of advantages. So, aside from the group practice by the practitioners, another approach is the group outreach as a strategy inside those agencies. Now, those who end up getting jobs, as I said, most of them are underpaid, overworked, and they are few. They are not enough. And they also suffer from lack of ready help at their workplaces, including promotions, um, study opportunities, training opportunities. Those who work alongside medics feel the worst brunt of it because medics enjoy all these benefits. But as I said, there now has been a bias against mental health practitioners. However, I'm a bit hopeful because of the board. The board is supposed to come and be the big brother for most of the um, psychologists, counselors, therapists, and MFTs. So, on financial models, the last part I want to say is the systems of care usually are sponsored from diaspora, and Africans and Kenyans have been treated to the NGOization culture. So, this NGO culture is such that most people believe there must be always a free mental health service. Now, the problem with some of these funding sources, they will run wonderful programs, but most of them are short lived. So the minute they leave, that entire program collapses until such a time when there's another sponsor, or another sponsorship. That's problematic because those who would love to charge even a modest fee are always up against there's this mentality that mental health is free and free. Now, of course, in our African culture, if you look at the indigenous socialization, we had healers who, when they provided their service, they got barter trade of either goods or services or influence or different things that were their reward. So they never went hungry. There was no commercialization per se in the early days in Africa. And there has been hypercapitalism, colonialism, white supremacy influences, as well as, just a lot of much more fragmentation of the mental health industry, such that right now you can get almost anything you need. This morning, somebody asked me for how to have someone in their family sleep better. So that's something you can get quite a number of practitioners to help you with. So there's been that kind of a shift, and that is a bit problematic because ideally speaking, governments should avail mental health practitioners to every last corner of the country so that everybody knows where to go if they are suicidal or they're stressed or they need, even if it's not clinical bit, even if they just need the positive psychology support, coaching, and you know um, building on their strengths. However, those basic infrastructure are still inadequate, and government jobs right now are all entry level. So those are some of the challenges around financing and the mindset, um, that it's still not a profession, it's still seen as a vocation, and it cannot surely be something that you can do lucratively. However, we have some hope with technology. Those of us in private practice know that when working with diaspora Africans, that profile of clients will pay early, pay on time, and they'll pay in bulk. And so, in terms of mental health, first, we initially, most of people in society thought it's about the very, very poor people who don't even have anything. But now we know there's something called the worried well. We have people who are doing well, are financially affluent, and they are not happy and they're not emotionally well. So there has been a different focus now, and that's beautiful because now we can even include people who are able to pay and have packages on online sites, and those who are middle class and maybe upper middle and upper class, those are people who don't mind, the convenience of the online and the anonymity it also can bring. So, for instance, now you can be on this call and I'm off on video. You never even have to see my face. And if I can get such an anonymous service, then I can feel free, to really process what's going on. I think mental health is here to stay, but we will need to professionalize the service by having government really coming into, what are the workers' plights, the workers' plight the in the not getting just basic remuneration. So I am what you call a Juakali practitioner. I've been doing only part-time work for 18 years, and I'm telling you, it's quite draining. Most of the time, you don't have any collateral. You have a lot of social capital, no commercial capital. Um, so those are the pros and cons about mental health work here.
Yeah, wow, that's such a comprehensive answer, and I love that. I love the openness and the honesty about what it really is on the ground, and especially as you mentioned, even for yourself, being in the kind of part time um, uh, service and work for 18 years. I know a beginner somewhere who is listening, and they're like, "What guy? Aki Oye, what will I do? But then I like that there's that honesty, because it also, I think when there's that honesty, there's also room
Yeah,
for more thought. People can now be
yeah,
like, okay, if these are some of the realities that are there, then I am equipped to
yeah,
go and
yes,
start serving, start doing my work, knowing that the journey might not be rosy the way it is often
yeah,
painted. It is not as romantic as it is often painted. And
yeah,
if I am prepared for the challenges and the positives that come with it, I can try to craft a career for myself. Um,
yeah.
I'm
And
very curious about
just to
what. Yeah.
reiterate, I do
Mhm.
have I do have other things I do apart from psychology to make a living.
Yeah.
So that's also a strategy that most of us have used. So that when we come to this, we do it without breaking any ethics and without harming clients, so that we are well sufficiently able to do the work. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's important. I think that's important. It's something that I've told most of the people that I speak to when it comes to mental health. Practicing as a therapist, do not have other sources of income, have other ways of using your degree beyond one-on-one therapy, because if you're only relying on your clients to pay every single one of your bills, if your client cancels, you are going to be depressed. You're going to become the client,
Yes.
because you have bills that
Yes.
do not care whether your client shows up to session or they do not show up to session. So I always encourage therapists in general to just have other things that bring you some income on the side. And I have listed those. I will not go into detail about them because they are scattered across multiple videos and books that I have written about the topic. Anyway, I'm very curious about some things that you have experienced in you've gone through what you mentioned: certificates, diploma, bachelor's, master's, PhD, and that's a lot of schooling. First of all, kudos. I don't know many people who are willing to persevere through that much formal education.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about some things that you have seen that
Mhm.
they're taught in the class, but kwa ground vitu ni very different. You learn and you're like, hiya, they didn't tell me this one. Because I think the disillusionment that
Yeah.
most practitioners experience is because they were told something in the class, and they studied that and they had a model, and then they get to the ground, they
Yeah.
get to actually working with clients, and they're like, wait, nobody prepared me for this. And that is something that I've had over and over again from therapists. I wonder what your experience has been with things not matching up. What was taught and what was actually in reality? They did not match up. What was that
Yeah.
for you?
I'm very lucky because both my parents are in the field. Both of them are
Oh,
trained
wow.
counselors. Yeah, I was very, very
Oh,
lucky,
we have
very
to talk about
fortunate.
that.
Yes. So at the start of my career, when I knew from high school I was going to bachelor's, my parents decided to sponsor a certificate course for me.
Hmm.
So I initially did not see the need because I thought, oh, I'm already in a bachelor's. Why should I go back and do a certificate? But now I see it was really essential. And because I was in a course that was doing person centered therapy, I was
Hmm.
able to merge my own personal processing of my pain, because at the time I was at a very critical transition in my life, as well as the professional. So the person of the profession model, POTT, came in handy. And so, with that experience, it opened me up to the gaps that could be in the academic space. Now, I must say, our academic institutions are doing a great job because they always take feedback and they do revise their curriculum. The curriculum I studied in 2006 for the bachelor's is not the same now. They've now greatly made it highly practical, but at the time, there were some challenges. So one of them was it was too much academic and did not give enough space for in practice work. The model was more built for an American audience, whereby in their country there's a robust framework where you only begin to be called a psychologist with a doctorate. So when you're doing bachelor's in the US, that's just like just testing the waters. You haven't even started. They actually talk about entry into the field around master's degree. So although that curriculum had been modeled after the American system, now it had to be adapted. In Kenya, we have an agency to deploy practitioners who will be integrated, and therefore we began to see changes. I was part of the curriculum review actually for the same all for all the degrees I've done. I've been part of the design and curriculum review. So so that really helped. And now I can tell you most bachelor's degrees even have a class on entrepreneurship, which I was describing earlier, on practical skill. And I also graduated with a specialization certificate in addiction counseling. That gave me my first job, actually. So after starting out my enterprise, I also got into my first job out of someone recommending me there. So at least I was able to get a concentrated field by the time I was finishing the same bachelor's. Um, but there are still many other programs aside from the one I did that still need to be meaningfully applied into the context. And maybe we need to think about, because we do have an urgent need to keep training, we also need to think seriously about incubation spaces. I think that's a gap. Universities sort of leave it to the students to look for an internship site. Those days, I struggled a lot with getting a well qualified site supervisor for my loci attachment practicum internship. But now we are seeing colleges and universities even listing places where, the idea of integrating academic knowledge, book knowledge with valuable on the ground experience will be useful. And it has helped raise the bar of competency, including moving mental health practitioners from merely psychosocial support, which anybody can do, a chaplaincy can do that, to, more clinical, in depth kind of work. Therefore, the necessities, of people in mental health care are now better taken care of. And we've stopped that perpetuating cycle of, people struggling, because we have deepened and expanded most of the program. So I'm glad universities have taken the effort to do things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Now that you've mentioned it, I'm very curious about your parents being practitioners, because I don't know if I have met anybody whose parents is actually whose parents are in the mental health profession. The clinicians I've
Mhm.
met, they're usually, most of them, they are the first generation of mental health practitioners in their families. I'm curious about
Yeah.
what life looks like when growing up with um, parents who are in the mental health profession. How did that
Uh-huh.
influence your decision to get into the field? How or not influence? How did being brought up with such parents look like? What was like? How was the parenting style from a parent who is a practitioner? Because I can imagine their profession really influences the person that they become. And in general,
Sure.
how does that impact the way you parent and the way that you practice as a therapist, growing up in a household where both
Yeah,
parents
good
were
questions.
practitioners? Yeah.
Yeah, so just to clarify, they are not career practitioners like me. My whole career is in the mental health space. For my parents, they were doing other things and then they
Mm,
got into mental health. And that's the most common pathway for, as you know, for mental health practitioners. So,
yeah.
and it was not throughout my childhood, it was only from adulthood. So, my
Okay.
both parents decided when I was around 19, they all had counseling as their second career.
Mm,
So, my dad had been an agriculture professor in the university for over 40 years. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
And my biological mother died, but she was a music professor also in the university. Then my dad remarried, and my stepmother was in religious life and got into counseling. So it so happens that when I met my father after some separation, I had told you my parents had divorced. So
yeah.
I had been separated from my dad at 11. When I met him at 18, we struck good rapport and were in touch. And then he gradually introduced me into the counseling aspect of the certificate level. He had just completed two higher diplomas, so he was very well grounded on the practice. In fact, I use most of his books for my training. Until date, I still have a lot of his books. And so I found that that was really interesting because we were also merging as a blended family. So we also had a lot of stuff to process. And one thing I still remember, my first ever counseling process. I still remember telling my counselor, "Oh, wow, you're so good, but you've gone so fast, so deep. I don't want to go there. Let's stop the counseling." I
Mm-hmm.
still remember
Mm-hmm.
then the entire process being quite overwhelming. And that experience was very important because in our field, we are expected to also go for personal therapy. So that whenever I remember that, I feel compassion for whoever comes to me for help, because there's an inherent power difference that especially the client will feel, and they will defer their authority to the counselor. And so my own experience of entering a counseling certificate course, which was also a process group, basically for 3 months, and they required us
Mm-hmm.
to start a practice. So I had to start a practice after a 3 month certificate course. And it was very successful practice. It was in Kariobangi. And this was an enterprise that I joined up with, some a well-established mental health practitioner, and we ran beautiful programs for the youth, and it was just amazing. And she took my naivety and really guided me well. And I credit a lot of my mentors along the way. I have many, including
Mm.
my parents, for that. My parents and I can sit and just talk and talk. And one thing I've noticed is from when I became an adult, my parents joined the field, and then my entire adulthood. So if other people come and find us talking, they can't tell that I'm the daughter. Because
Yeah,
now we can
yeah, I
sit
can
and
imagine.
just talk as colleagues. Yeah, and we can
Yeah.
really go on and on. And most of the time, it's not like talking about our clients, it's talking about our own experience and the constructs
Mm-hmm.
and the theories and the techniques that has greatly catapulted me. And um, just on the same note, I had been doing off the cuff random trainings for people until one time I met classmate of mine who's I also credit for having also given me a major career boost, because she
Mm.
told me that I am really good in training and research. She said in my career I shouldn't stress for not seeing one-on-one clients, because most of us
Mm.
graduates, like I said earlier, we are
Oh
hung up
God,
on,
yeah.
oh, we have to go see individual clients. And
Yeah.
so my classmate was super fantastic. She told me my strengths, and I decided to try it out. So I launched my
Mm-hmm.
research consultancy and also
Mm.
training, and it flourished. My classmate was expert career consultant, and she said, "I don't even need to test you. I know you. I can see you even help us as classmates with our research." Now, I'm very lucky also because both my parents were professors. My biological parents were professors, so I was very, very
Yeah.
lucky. I didn't struggle on the any academic writing skills or things like that, because they our parents highly involved all of us at home. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have to talk about this while I'm still at my parents. My biological mom was a musician. I've never thrown that away. As a matter of fact, I have integrated creative art therapies as, for me, conventional. I don't like the use of the word alternative or complementary. For me, I consider it mainstream, therapies. All the music, movement, art, drawing, that came straight from my biological mom. Then I found myself having a major interest in worldviews, religion, different religions, Pan Africanism. That's my dad. A very scientific way of looking at things. And then the other thing that I borrowed directly from my dad is herbal medicine.
Mm.
So my dad happens to be in the lineage of herbal medicine men. So his grandfather taught his father, who taught him how to heal people using herbs. His grandfather never went to hospital, of course, those days, and his father only a few times, and even rejected Western medicine. And so my
Yeah.
dad just gave me that, and I always have a bunch of things. And my latest program is actually psychonutrition. So I'm doing a
Mm-hmm.
nutrition for well-being program at the moment, and I just noticed I have a lot of input from my parents, and now I can see how it all came together. The beauty about our field is nothing from your personal influences gets lost. You have it all right there. And then I'm also really close to my sisters, two of whom are really good in international relations. I'm leveraging on their
Mm-hmm.
knowledge for my Pan African quest. And
Yeah.
then one of them is a medic, and there's also HR. So I'm getting all of these things just from my worldview. I'm getting this as competencies. So think about how many languages you know. That gives you a lot of cultural competence, you know. So just even
Yeah.
just thinking about language on its own just gives you a window to people. So I work a lot with the deaf and hard of hearing. I'm fluent in sign language. Never went to school for that. I just have a passion towards working with those people. So those are
Yeah.
some
Wow.
unifying links. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the career is better off with people thinking of themselves as all rounders. So right now in the jobs group, I help people write their CVs, and guess what? People only want to write the paid jobs.
Hmm.
And I go like, no, that cannot be mental health career. Your mental health career includes all of your volunteerships, which are actually more than your
Hmm.
paid
Hmm.
work, all of your community leadership, all of that stuff. That is what you've been trying to do. And people always get wowed and aha moments when I'm refashioning their CVs in order for them to attract, the crowd, the tribe that they want to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
impressive. That's really cool. And it's interesting how you got to experience all these things and having these parents who are also not just one-dimensional humans, and I think they fashion the way you see the world. They
Yeah.
also help in you developing a multi-dimensional way of being,
Mm.
and a belief in yourself that you can actually fit in many different situations because you are open to trying them all. You are open to experiencing life in its fullness. I think that's
Yeah.
very important, and especially for us as mental health professionals, because we work with people from different walks of lives, and you need to be open to seeing the world from their point of view if you're ever going to be able to walk with them on their healing journey. So that is quite impressive. I'm curious about because I know somebody might be listening and maybe they are people who came from families where there was divorce. There, as you mentioned, there was the death of your mom. So
Yeah.
that's an area with grief. Now there's the introduction of a stepmother, and then it's a blended family, and this is all very big for most people to even
Yeah.
fathom and to experience. So I'm very curious about for you. What was the experience of what was the impact of your parents' divorce on you
Mhm.
as Joyce? What was the impact of this divorce on your family? How did that impact the person that you became? How did that influence you? And who was the biggest
Mhm.
support system for you during that time? And how did you manage to come out of it stronger and able to integrate all these aspects for yourself?
Yeah. So let me start by saying my lowest point in my career is when my mom died.
Yeah.
So it was very traumatic. It was not a normal death. She was killed, and she was in the same university where I was going to school. So you can just
Mm,
imagine. So I
mm,
skipped school for like 2 weeks, and then I came back. I was in the middle of my master's, and then everybody looked at me. They didn't even know what to say. And then I didn't sit at the front. Like, I'm always a very enthusiastic learner. I went and sat at the back, and it was like, oh my goodness. So, but I've struggled with depression from high school. Like I said, I was devastated, and as a child, like most children, blaming myself for my parents having broken up. Aside from trauma and depression, I was also diagnosed with codependency. So at first, I didn't understand what kind of diagnosis is codependency until I saw it is a trauma reaction. It is where, I didn't really have boundaries. I was a very much people pleaser. I didn't know how to say no. And that affected a lot of my relationships. And I've had to learn now to preserve my own worth, dignity, and freedom of choice, and to say no when I need to say no in relationships. And blended family was a comfort for me. It was a space to learn about having a brother, because now I have a half brother, because in my biological family, I only had three sisters and no brother. But now I got a half brother. It was nice, such a welcome relief. And also, my biggest support, other than close family, has been school. I think just the routines of being in school and getting myself under lots and lots of mentorship, coaching, counseling, pastoring. Those kinds of structures have enabled me to succeed. I was introduced to the concept of it in high school because we used to have all these people coming to give talks, and I would always record their phone numbers. And guess what? After high school, I called them up. And so I believe, and I must say, in high school, I also had an experience of being nominated as a student leader. And I had vehemently tried to refuse that. Then guess what? The deputy principal called me to the office and said, "You, if you forget everything that I'll ever tell you, never forget this. Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it comes the issues of life." So that biblical verse has always stayed with me because she was basically telling me that, I was listening so much to the opposition, to the naysayers, to other people who would have wanted to vie for the position but did not make it. And I was already a student leader. I was the music captain in high school. That's courtesy of my mom. And all of us sisters were music leaders throughout school because of my mother. So I realized that leadership experience is something that has just been with us. My mom had warned us when we were small. She said, if you have any musical prowess, you're naturally a leader because you're the person who can play the piano, you can lead people in the school anthem. And that's what we did throughout school. And so it wasn't a surprise to become a music captain, but I had tried to refuse to be a leader. So I would also say being equipped with leadership skills helps me a lot to transcend a lot of, especially naysayers, because as a person who struggled with codependency, you can imagine how, for me, my boundaries were like trying to please everyone. And now I've, you know, had to incorporate other leadership styles where, I've got to assert myself sometimes. And that's not always compatible with everybody, but that has helped me a great deal. So, Amanda, always typically, I have a coach, a supervisor, a mentor, a pastor, different people speaking into my life. And I'm glad that I am fortunate to say that I am very privileged for having received that. And so for me, it's now my season to give back and to create systems for manifesting that kind of various forms of giving back and growing the next generation.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. And you've mentioned that you don't necessarily run a full practice with clients and everything. And now
Yeah,
that you're talking about divorce and grief, and we're talking about depression, we're talking about all these challenges. I am curious about what clients, kind of clients you work with. If they were listening,
yeah,
who would they be, and what message would you have for them if they're listening and maybe they are struggling with any of the things that you've mentioned: codependency, people pleasing, depression, the fear of leading or taking up positions of leadership when they are thrust upon you. Maybe they are dealing with a divorce, or they are children whose uh, parents have had a divorce. Like, if these were some of your clients that you're speaking to right now, what is something that
yeah,
you would tell them to help them navigate the next 24 hours, the next 1 month, the next one
yeah.
year before they find you?
Yeah, so first of all, my practice is minimum 4 hours a week. So at least
Mm,
I see, about 4 hours of direct client care. And
yeah.
then all of the other work I do in my practice is all the systems building that I had described earlier. So it comes to
Hmm.
about 4 to 10 hours a week. But at least I have 4 hours clocked in, that's for sure. Even on idle weeks, I do have that. Because I work for agencies and I have contracts. I'm currently consulting with some schools, some mental health organizations,
Yeah.
and different other welfare groups and stuff.
Hmm.
So, what I would say is that there is a chance in mental health work to understand oneself, to overcome a lot of challenges in everyday life. And these don't have to be very humongous. They can also be the most common challenges of everyday life. Just having a sounding board for someone to, talk to, I think it's a really good privilege. I think anybody who has the privilege of, some time should make a point of getting into mental health practice or office, because that's the place you can take actionable steps to improve your life. You don't have to come when something is wrong or stressed or broken. No, You can just come to deal with everyday experiences because mental health and therapy can help you cope and identify your strengths and weaknesses, recognize your emotions and triggers. The idea is to overcome any issues that may arise and come out stronger, with better life management, basically. So it's a critical component for both personal and group success. So I would highly recommend, and I say it's like the analogy of going to a spa or taking a vehicle for full service. That's pretty much what it is. And there you get practical advice, innovative solutions, valuable insights. And so you don't have to face these complex problems about life or decision making dilemmas on your own. You can have a sounding board, just those of us who have seen many, many, many people with very similar patterns of how, we've learned the basic principles of how humanity is. Therefore, that can increase your consciousness or awareness of different things. So I would recommend mental health therapy for anybody, really. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And many people can attest that they have benefited from therapy. So it's not like we are recommending something that does not work. There are people
Yeah.
who have benefited from it. So if they have benefited, you might as well give it a try. So we are coming very close to the end of this conversation, which has been very interesting. I have so many questions that would not fit in this podcast episode, and maybe we'll talk about them at another time. But for now, I'm very curious about again going back to your practice. You've mentioned now that you do like 4 hours of client work, and the rest of the time is building practices and systems. Sorry, and I'm sure there's somebody who's listening who is maybe a beginner. They want to begin their private practice. They don't know where to start, or even if they do know where to start, they are curious about some of the things that go on in a private practice. So I'm very curious personally about some of the tools that you use to run your private practice. I know you've mentioned technology, and I'm always looking for new tools to add in my toolkit and to also give the new therapists to start out with. So I'm curious about some of the tools that have become key in running your private practice, in building your systems, that you would recommend new therapists or therapists who are using technology for their practice to check out and to maybe implement in their work to streamline their services. What are some of those things that you highly recommend? Some of those tech
Sure.
tools you highly recommend? Yeah,
Yeah, there are many tools and technologies that are actually virtually free. And even if
yeah,
you just did a Google search or Chat GPT or AI and such, you'll get
mhm.
them on the internet. So the easiest and free for all is Google Suite. All of the Google document, Google
I
Form,
live by Google Suite. I love. They should
Gmail.
hire me at this point. I
I
live for Google
know.
Suite. The
Yeah, I
workspace is just the
know.
best thing.
Yes, so the Google
Yeah,
Workspace gives me leverage, especially because I need to schedule. Like Google Calendar helps me a lot. I
yeah,
use a lot of forms. I build a lot of forms which are easy to build, asking
yeah,
people what they need before they come in, either for a training or any kind of equipping. That sort of scheduling helps me anticipate what expectations people have so that when they arrive, I'm also ready for them.
yeah,
And then your Calendly, just any of the apps that enable scheduling. And Google Workspace is not only about scheduling, it's also about lots of content sharing. I put up
mhm,
most of my slides on links. So most of the people I work with will just use their phone to review any material. So I'm able to upload it on links and they can look at it on their phone. And then, of
yeah,
course, I do lots of research myself. So I have all different softwares for that kind of work.
mhm,
But the other one that I would mention that I think is worthy mentioning here is web apps. There's a whole bunch
mm,
of resources that are online. And because we have both phone apps and web apps, we are now able to integrate online work. I have met some older generation therapists who don't believe in online at all. There are some who also don't have a preference, and that's okay. But for
yeah,
those who may want to check out apps designed to improve well being, you'll find that they are very nice because they are private, confidential, anonymous. So they are able to support a lot of individuals and teams of people. So those are
yeah,
some offerings that are just free, easy to go. our work has a lot of documentation. So I
Mm-hmm.
do have automations for documents, and I'm always writing either invoices or reports or things like that, because part of also
Yeah.
private practice is business sourcing, building, and documenting. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, I think those are like the basic ones that everybody should try and check out. I think I've recommended this more than once to as many people as I can. So I'm always like singing from the uh, highest rooftops that Google Workspace is the God we bow to when it comes to tech in the
yeah,
private practice setup. If you are just starting out, do not think too hard. Just get Google Workspace. Um, as we talk about the therapists and beginners and people who are getting into this profession,
mhm,
you have 18 years of experience, and I am sure that cannot be put in one sentence, but I will highly encourage that you put it in one sentence. Advice for beginner therapists, advice for people who are in their, let's say, the first 5 years of their practice. They've just
mhm.
gotten getting used to being a therapist, somebody's therapist. What advice would you give them to give them some confidence and to give them some courage to continue doing the important and difficult work that it is that we do? What is something that you would gather from your 18 years of experience that you would pass on as words of wisdom?
Yeah, to maintain competency throughout mental health careers, we require ongoing training
Yeah.
in the form of mentorship, consultations, things like that. And we also require supervision. And then lastly, I would say we also require to join professional networking groups, both
Mm,
inside and outside mental health space, in order for us to become alive and um, useful and reinforce each other, in the field. Referrals and networking are very important because nobody can do everything. And that's why we
yeah.
have niching and specialization. So if you can get yourself in a body that you feel, fulfilled in, then you will also enjoy the solidarity, of your fellow comrades.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So I am a big advocate of I'm a big advocate of supervision and getting into groups with other therapists. Like I always encourage people, even beginner therapists, please get into a group that has other
Mm,
therapists that you can talk to, or as often as possible if you need to. Not necessarily for clinical support, of which it can be, but also for
yeah.
just the moral support, because many therapists really struggle with imposter syndrome. Many therapists struggle with feeling like they don't know what they're doing, and they are afraid that other therapists are going to find out that they do not know what they're doing. So there's a lot
Mm,
of it's a complex mix when it becomes it comes to the profession. So I highly encourage anybody who's listening and they are a beginner in the field, please join a group with other therapists in it. Whether they are beginners or not, just join one where there's somebody else you can talk to, and it will greatly
yes.
greatly impact the way you practice. It will impact the therapist that you become, and also even as you're joining, don't join blindly. At least join places that you feel you're safe psychologically
Yeah.
to have difficult conversations, and especially difficult conversations about yourself, that because yourself impacts the therapy work. Yourself impacts how you show up in therapy. Yourself impacts the way your clients perceive therapy. So those groups that can help you grow as an individual are super 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 helpful, and highly encourage those. Joyce, you do a lot of things, as you've mentioned. You wear so many hats. I think this is what you mentioned in the beginning. What are some
Yeah.
self-care tools, practices, tips, techniques, things that you use to
Mhm.
ensure that all these hats that you're wearing,
Yes.
they are getting the best of you in the most practical way? What are these self-care tools that you use personally, and some that you recommend
Mhm.
to others to try out? What are those?
Yeah, so for my self-care, I'm really big on scheduling. So it will be easier for to get me on a scheduled call than a random one. That's because I've just been very clear on putting some structure in the spontaneity. So at least with the control of being in private practice, I can decide the use of my time, and that gives me a better mental health, space. So for me, the first self-care tool is just a regimented, calendar that's well known in advance, both by myself and by my team. I consider that a
Yeah.
problem solving strategy. But I also have many emotion focused strategies. I do lots of talking with friends who care for me, especially on heavy days,
Mhm.
busy days,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
difficult days, days with difficult cases to handle. I talk with
Yeah.
friends who care for me. I am big on, I love cycling. I love cycling in the forest. I don't cycle on the roads because of the
Nairobi is
traffic.
not a place to cycle on the road anyway.
Yeah, some
It's
people
like they
don't mind,
don't
but
want us to.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
I'm
so scary.
traumatized. Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
it's too much. Yeah, but I love cycling in the forest, and sometimes I do it alone, sometimes with friends. I
Mm.
love spending time with friends and family, um, and getting, personal strength from reading. I have a bunch of books that I'm following. I'm big on
Mm.
reading. I'm not big on watching a lot of stuff, but I do have some movie buff friends who try to
Ah,
make me watch some things. And then I'm big on rest. I sleep early. So surprisingly, while people think I'm always online, no, actually, no, I sleep really,
yeah.
really early. And
Yeah.
so that helps me. For me, sleep is a big, you know, place of comfort. I avoid drugs and alcohol. I'm big on healthy eating. I have proper
Yeah.
nutrition, that I can say. So
Hmm.
I'm physically healthy because of all that. So, and then, yeah, aside from setting limits, it's just I journal a lot of my thoughts and feelings um, as well. So those are some self care tips. And
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
good
That was really
laugh.
good.
I ran a very
Oh,
big Humor for Resilience group. It was my TED talk
yeah.
in
Yeah.
2020, so I decided to make a group. So I always am the group admin, and we only post clean humor. So I
Mm.
love laughing, drinking lots of water, and just enjoying, even if things are so sometimes so out of control.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Now that
Mhm.
you've mentioned it, you mentioned two things that we have not spoken about, and I was going to ask you that. You mentioned a TED talk, and you've mentioned something else that I will ask after. The book recommendations. Now that you mentioned that you read a
Yes.
lot, please
Yeah.
drop some book recommendations that maybe what you're currently reading, or maybe some book
Yeah.
recommendations that you think everybody should read, or every therapist should read. Those are three categories
Yeah.
of recommendations. Pick whichever you like, or
Okay.
pick all three, and then after that, tell us about your TED talk. How was that experience, and how has it improved or your life and your practice as
Mhm.
a therapist?
Yeah, sure. So I will recommend one by a practitioner. It's called Parenting
Yeah.
with the Heart by Dr. Carol Chakwa. I'm gonna
Hmm.
pick only Kenyan authors because I think it's good to promote our very own. She's written it in a very understandable way, and her analogy is that parents should be farmers, not carpenters. So if you think of that
Oof.
analogy, then you know what kind of parent she wants people to be. So parenting from the
Yeah.
heart. Yeah?
Mm.
And then I also like books written by people outside of mental health that speak into cosmologies or ways of knowing things, ontologies,
Yeah.
and things. So I'm a favorite. I'm a staple of Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Mm.
There are many books, but there's one I'll highlight. It's called "I Will Marry When I Want." This is
Hmm.
actually a
Hmm.
drama set book. However, it has a lot of nuances about the political freedom at the time, and those days
Yeah.
you wouldn't just write about like politics. There was a lot of punishment. So, and he wrote it, and then later on went to exile. And then
Hmm.
I will also mention a book by a person with lived experience. I
Mm.
think that if you read books written by people who've gone through something, you get a lot.
Yeah.
So let me see which one from my bookshelf. Yeah, I don't see the one I wanted to say, but it's I forget the title, but it's by Richard Kiundi. I will probably
Richard
remember the
Kioni.
title a bit later. Oh yes, I
Yeah.
remember what it is. I've seen it. So
Mm.
this is a book on Through the Wilderness of Life by
Hmm.
Richard Kiundi. He's also his nickname is the Duke of Emali. This guy got cancer and then became cancer free. So it's
Mm.
one of those miraculous stories of post traumatic stress, chronic illness, and then now he's going into farming and healthy lifestyle. And he's cancer was arrested just, by sheer fortune. Otherwise, he was dying. It's just a very a story of full of resilience.
Yeah.
Now, this one is not even, bias anybody in mental health, but has a lot of things that mental health people need to capture. He also goes into his Akamba ancestry, which I find
Mm.
extremely fascinating. So I have met the authors of this book, so
Mm.
those are powerful people in my life.
Nice, nice, nice. And what are you
Yeah.
currently reading?
Oh, so currently I'm reading a book by Thomas Parham. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Counseling Persons of African Descent,
Mm.
Raising the Bar of Practitioner Competence. So I'm very fascinated. My next course that I'm going to build is not just on multicultural aspects of counseling, the way we did them in when training, just by in
Yeah.
passing. I want to go into the core of what makes something Afrocentric, and I want to see what did we leave out in our field when we went all Western and called Sigmund Freud the father of psychology and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a bit provocative and a little controversial. I've already started getting some of the sentiments from some close colleagues.
Ah,
But I
nice.
think there's something, yeah, I think there's something in our indigenous practice. I think there's something we can go back for, as the Sankofa proverb says, that it is not bad to go back for that which you forgot. So I'm very fascinated right now by culture and how that influences mental health and
Mm.
what I started off by saying, white supremacy, commodification of mental health.
Yeah.
Such concepts right now, I'm very engrossed in them. The rise of the mental
Mm.
health NGO, and which is the broader crisis of capitalism. Those are some of the things. White supremacy. I'm very, very, very interested in that kind of stuff at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Nice.
All
Yeah,
right.
we can. I can hear it in your voice as you talk about it. The passion is evident. You do not have to worry
Yes.
about the passion being there. We can hear it
Mm,
so loud and clear. And for me, I'm a big. One thing that makes me happy is hearing people
mm,
passionate about something. That
yeah.
just makes me so happy. It might be whatever it is. I am very happy when I hear people passionate about something. So I'm happy that you're
Yeah.
passionate about this thing, and I can't wait to see what comes out of it. And what it will teach us as mental health professionals, and what it will add to the field. That is something that I am interested in hearing.
Mhm.
Tell us about your TED Talk as we come to the end of these conversations. Tell us about how that
Yeah.
came up and how that impacted you, and where that took you, where that took your career, and
Yeah.
everything about TED Talks that we might not be privy to as outsiders.
Yeah. So one of those lockdown days, I decided I'd been sitting in the house too long. So I looked up events in town and saw a TED Talk. So I thought, oh, this is an event I would like to attend. And surprise, surprise, when I got there, I met my friend who's my colleague. And then she's like, let's take a photo on the stage. Then we took a
Mm,
photo. Then she looks at the photo and said, this photo is so good. We are doing the next TED Talk and we will be on this stage. I looked at her like, you must be kidding. Us guys, me and you, and my colleague, my very good friend Mary Kitaka, coaxed me into, being the leader I am. I had also talked about struggling with this concept of am I a leader from when I was young,
yeah.
yeah. So she got me to see that actually we could do it. And it was also quite against the grain because most people just do a TED talk as one speaker. Now there's a very rigorous process. You have to design a speech that's not less than 9 minutes and not more than 18 minutes. The speech must be only based on one idea. Okay,
Mm,
so if you have anything more than one idea, it's extracted, it's removed. The speech must be submitted to the headquarters in the US, in New York, and returned. And you've got to keep modifying it and make sure all copyrights are observed and all other ethical issues. So we did a lot of work with a coach. It was really rigorous and it was on Zoom. It was not easy.
mm,
And our coach was very gracious with us and helped us through the content and the delivery. Now we went on stage and had to be physically distant. So if you see my TED talk, we had to be outside of the red circle, although we usually are supposed to be inside the red circle. So we were each
yeah.
standing outside because of the physical distancing rules. And it went really, really fantastic. And from there, I am now running a growth group on humor for resilience. We are now a big
Mm,
community. over 300 people online, just
Mm.
clean humor. And many people have given us really good testimonials. They were having a bad day, but they just look out for our icon, our group on WhatsApp, and they feel much better just entering there and laughing. And so we are very
Yeah.
categorical. We do not allow violent humor, only
Hmm.
clean humor. No aggressive humor is allowed. All other kinds of humor are okay. So we have four humor styles. So that's the
Mm.
TED Talk. Now, the other highlight of my career was a global award by American Psychological Association. So this is on a different
Mm.
note, but as a doctoral student, I happened to fundraise and by a miracle managed to get enough money from family and friends to the tune of about 1 million Kenya shillings. That's why I started off by saying it seems like mental health workers have more social capital than commercial capital, because I was a student and I
Mm.
had a lot of student loans, but I
Hmm.
managed to fundraise just by, people being kind to me. They gave me gifts. Nobody gave me a loan to repay. I was very
Mm.
lucky. So I went to the US for 1 month and I presented a paper on mental health of deaf people. That has become one of my pet populations. And
Mm.
now we were surprised. We didn't know that this whole thing would end up being a victory for our student competition we had enrolled for. And so suddenly we were surprised with like we were one of the top winners, and that global award has opened up very many doors for me. I've been
Hmm.
able to serve in the national mental health policy framework, which invented the 10-point communique that had the former president Uhuru uh, endorsing the 10-year mental health action plan. So now in Kenya, if
Mm.
you go to the Ministry of Health website, we do have an action plan with deliverables for the kind of change we want to see in the development of mental health in this country. And I'm
Yeah.
just really fortunate to have volunteered my time and expertise and having been recognized for it. I was also the one of the moderators, a panelist, and the sign language interpreter at the first ever National Mental Health Conference in KICC, September, no,
Hmm.
that was November 2019, just before COVID. So,
Yeah.
so those were some two highlights, the TED Talk and the APA Global Award.
Congratulations, congratulations. That's amazing. That's
Thank
really
you.
impressive. And I think it also speaks to the power of resilience, the power of pushing beyond the classroom, pushing beyond what I learned in class as a therapist to applying myself beyond my degree. And it's something that you touched on in the beginning when you said there's a misconception among new, fresh mental health professionals, believing that now that I have graduated and I have my certificate, then now I'm going to have these millions of clients who are going to show up at my door. But then they forget that there's a lot of work that goes into really building yourself a career that is unconventional, because the more unconventional, the more unique it is, and the more unique it is, the more doors it might open for you as an individual and as a mental health professional. So that is very, very impressive. And congratulations, very many congratulations. I wish you nothing but the best in the coming years as you continue to push yourself and push the mental health field forward. I um, I have I have learned a lot from this conversation, and I am very grateful for your time. Before we end the conversation, what have you what do you feel that we have not spoken about in this session that you would
Um,
want to touch on? What is that one important thing we
yeah,
have not spoken about?
I would like us to come back on a different day and deepen the conversation about Afrocentric mental
Yeah.
health.
Mhm.
Some countries in Africa are really bold, like South Africa. They completely removed the Western based curriculum. They're not teaching
Yeah.
Sigmund Freud at all.
Ah.
They are teaching how people talk to the ancestors in the graves, and
Hmm.
they've completely overhauled the entire academic curriculum. That's gonna be one of my mandates going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, maybe on a different day we can do that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Once you're done with your new course, the one you mentioned,
Yes.
tell us. You have an open invitation to conversations with the therapist. Tell us when you're
Yep.
ready. Come back and we'll talk about Afrocentric mental health, and we'll talk about the courses that you're creating. This platform is for mental health professionals, and you are a mental health
Mm,
professional, so we'll be honored to have you come back and tell us more about all these things, because I know there's a hunger for knowledge, and not just knowledge, but
mm,
knowledge that really is specifically for Kenyans, for Africans,
Yes.
not something that is modified for us from a different population. So I think that's very
Yes.
important. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Joyce, for coming through. I don't know if you have any resources or any mental health thing that you would want people to check out to advance their mental
Yeah.
health on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. If maybe they don't have access to a therapist or they're not ready to start therapy, is there something that you would direct them to that they can check out and read for themselves or explore for themselves?
I think I'll be posting more going forward. I've not been posting
Yeah,
so much, but my website is
yeah,
wangari.africa. Let's keep in
yeah.
touch.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. And
Okay.
that's where they can find all the things that you are working on and all the groups that you've mentioned and all the resources. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I
Okay,
will be
Wangari Africa.
updating them. Yeah.
All right. That's awesome. Thank you, Wangari. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everybody who has listened to this episode. I hope that you have found benefit out of this. If you have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comment section wherever you listen to this episode. As always, check out free mental health resources in the description. There's a link there that has access to mental health resources that are free and available for you wherever you are. And above and beyond that, if you have any questions about psychology, if you have any questions about mental health, if you have any questions about anything to do with being human, please share them with us. The email address is always safespacearena@gmail.com. We are available on social media. I will respond to you in 48 hours or less. And yeah, I'll see you on the next episode. Take care of yourself, take care of mental health, and take care. Ciao.
Okay. Bye.